When I'm often asked if I could sum up Buddhism briefly, what Buddhism is about, I always refer to the Four Noble Truths. Buddhism, like any philosophy or any religion worth the name, has all sorts of aspects to it. It has all sorts of modalities. We could look at the philosophy, the psychology, the meditation tradition, the history, the monastic tradition, Buddhist ethics. There's a lot to unpack there. But I think it would be true to say that the essence, the most fundamental principle that underlies all these other things would be the Four Noble Truths. That is the beginnings of Buddhism. No matter how far you stray from them, all worthwhile aspects and important aspects of Buddhism in one way or another come back to the Four Noble Truths. So it can be worthwhile just giving some explanation to what these four truths are. So the Four Noble Truths are the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the possibility of overcoming suffering, and the truth of how to accomplish that, how to overcome suffering. And couched in those terms, it's not at all surprising perhaps that somebody who hears that for the first time thinks, goodness me, what a negative, pessimistic view of life. So we have to perhaps say something about the key word here, which is dukkha. Dukkha, the cause of dukkha, the overcoming of dukkha, and how to overcome dukkha. So dukkha is a word that's very hard to translate it with one word. So it can mean suffering, physical and psychological. It can mean the feeling of inadequacy or incompleteness. It can mean stress. In fact, I've seen it translated by one modern interpreter of Buddhism as stress or stressfulness. It can mean just a sort of an empty feeling, a feeling that even while things can be okay, they're not quite perfect. There's always, as we say, a fly in the ointment. And it's also important to remember that in making this statement, the Buddha did not deny that there's the possibility of happiness and fulfillment in the world. In fact, in one place in his scriptures, he says, I set out to find the happiness in the world, and I found it, but I also found its limitations. I think that pretty well sums up the importance of how to understand dukkha from a Buddhist perspective. The reason that the Buddha didn't start with happiness is because if happiness has a problem to it, it's only that we don't get enough of it, that we're always looking to find something else, something that could make us more happy, or that the happiness lasts for a while and then it's disappears and is replaced by a feeling of a lack of happiness. I think another interesting thing about the idea of dukkha is that it's possible that there are some people who have never been or are very rarely happy. In the world today there are conflicts and all over the world and that. There are people living in large numbers, living in refugee camps all over the world, and their lives could be far from happy. They may have moments of happiness or extended periods of happiness, but behind that is their homelessness, that they've been driven out of their countries by conflicts or something like that. It may be that there are some people who very rarely experience happiness. The last thing about dukkha is, I think, perhaps the most important. In many other religions, the focus is upon something outside ourselves. Normally, in the case of religion, usually God or the gods. we want to know what God wants us to do, or we want to communicate with God, or which is, it's okay. But the Buddha changed the direction of religion, if indeed Buddhism can be considered a religion, by turning that focus of attention around to oneself. There may or may not be a God. Some people have faith that there is, some people don't. But there's one thing for certain: I know that I exist, and I know how I feel. I know that sometimes I'm happy, but sometimes I'm not. I don't have a problem with happiness, but I do have a problem with suffering or with dukkha. And that's what we mean by the first noble truth. The second noble truth is, what causes this? When we feel inadequate or incompleteness, or why do we feel it? Well, the Buddha's analysis was, in one way or another, it's related to wanting things to be different from how they are. Now, when you want things to be different from how they are, sometimes that spurs you, it motivates you to try to change things so that they become the way you want. And there are many things that we can do to bring that about. If we're cold, for example, we can go and put on a jacket or a coat and become warm. But there are also quite a lot of things in life that we can't do that to, no matter how hard we try. For example, I don't want to die. Unfortunately, for the time being at least, as much as I want it, that simply is not going to happen. Or it may be that somebody falls in love with somebody who just has no feeling for them. So no matter how much they love that person, the person they love just doesn't love them. That causes them some distress. Sickness is one of the forms of dukkha that the Buddha often talked about. If you're very fortunate and you're careful and you look after yourself, you may never get or very rarely become sick. But despite your best efforts, sometimes you get something despite yourself. And until recently, when medicine wasn't as developed as it is now, many times when you got sick, you either stayed sick, or you died of the sickness, or the sickness simply ran its course and you were able to return to health. Fortunately, through the miracle of modern science, now so many sicknesses they've got some sort of cure for, some solution to, and that's wonderful. But people still do get sick. So once again, we see this connection between wanting things to be different from they are, and this accentuates this feeling of dukkha. And that's the second noble truth. And then the third noble truth is, perhaps you could say it's axiomatic. If this causes that, then if this is eliminated, that will disappear. So here the Buddha his message is positive, you might say. There is a problem, but there is also a solution to the problem. That is, if we were to modify or to understand or to eliminate our desire for always wanting things to be different from what they really are, then we could come to terms with the dukkha. And the fourth noble truth is, okay, how to do that? What steps to take to overcome clinging and craving so that we can transcend beyond suffering or dukkha. And that's the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. So, problem, cause of problem, solution to problem, how to apply that solution. You might see it in those terms. Or you might put it this way: I'm sick, I go to the doctor, he tells me what has made me sick, then he reassures me that we do have a treatment or a medicine for it. He gives me the medicine, he prescribes the medicine, and he tells me how to take it. and I take it and I overcome my sickness. So what is this fourth noble truth? It's called the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. It's called noble because it ennobles the person who puts this program into practice. It's called a path, or magga, because it goes from one place, the place of inadequacy and conflict and dissatisfaction, to a place of peace and rest. And sometimes the Buddha also gave it a secondary name. He called it the middle way, Majjhima Patipada. So it's not just a path, it's a path that avoids extremes. Traditionally, these extremes are the extremes of sensuality on the one hand and self-mortification on the other. Somewhere in the middle of this, disciplined but not over-disciplined, having these 8 parts to them. So the first one is right understanding. Second one is right thought. Third one, right speech. Fourth one, right action. Fifth one, right livelihood. Sixth one, right effort. Seventh one, right mindfulness. And the 8th one, right concentration. So they look like, so you might say, the first one would be intellectual training. The next 4 would be ethical training. And the last 3 would be mental or psychological training. I can't go into the details here, but you might say that most of the rest of Buddhism can be found in one or another, or a combination of all of these steps. So when I am asked, how would you sum up Buddhism? I would say you can sum up Buddhism by talking about the 4 noble truths, of which the last one is the Noble Eightfold Path.